Assalamu alaikum students. How are you people? Yes, how was your previous lecture on micro-teaching? Alright. So dear students, today we are going to start the fourth lecture or the fourth part of our micro-teaching. Remember that? Yes. I'm sure you have revised first 3 lectures on micro-teaching. And I'm also certain you people know importance of micro-teaching. Why? Because this is the area which takes you directly to the class, where you being student of TEFL, you being student of this course, learn practically how to teach language. I hope you understand how you teach English as a foreign language. And here the strategies that we must keep in mind to be an effective teacher, we try to incorporate, we try to exercise. And again, why do we do that? Because this is a practical training. You are being trained, and there is a person who supervises you, who sees you in fact, who evaluates you, who assesses you. How do you teach? How you enter the class, how you begin teaching, how you manage your presentation stage, how you deal with your practice stage, and how you in fact undergo your production stage, how you make your lesson plan, how you write on board, right? So all these elements that we tried to cover in this micro teaching, and we have been trying from the day we started talking of micro teaching. Clear? And I told you that we would spend more time on micro teaching, and today it is our 4th lecture on this micro teaching. I'm sure the first 3 lectures on micro teaching were a great help to you people, and you must have learned a lot. You must have gained confidence how to manage a class, how to start teaching English as a foreign language. And for those who are going to start teaching English as a foreign language, they must have got an idea that it is a very, very enjoyable activity, right? Those of you who were reluctant to teach language, particularly English language, must have had an understanding that this is a very good activity, right? And it is not a very difficult job. We can do it if we keep in mind some strategies that we have talked about, or we will be talking in this lecture as well. So again, if I go back to very first lecture, your commitment to your profession is a must. Role of the teacher. We started off the course, if you remember, in the 2nd lecture, we talked about role of a language teacher. So keeping that role of a language teacher in mind, and keeping the lesson plans that we had so far, I'm sure now you are in a better position to face your class. So let's start today's lecture, the 4th part of our micro teaching. So as usual, what we do, we review the previous lecture. So in the last lecture, we talked about skills of micro teaching, right? And with skills particularly we talked about skills of probing questions. You know that when you ask questions, right, so you in fact evaluate the student. you probe, of course, information, you ask questions, and the probing questions particularly, in fact, facilitate the learner, right? So on the one hand, you teach your students how to ask questions in a foreign language, and once they reply, they learn how to reply. And in this way, when the questions are asked and answers are given, so there is a dialogue, right? And you being teacher, when you probe questions, when you ask questions, you try to evaluate, you try to think of different directions, right? And also when you ask questions, you try to give confidence to the learner, so that he would come out of his shell, right? The learner would start replying, right? So in this way, my dear students, we being teachers of this course, teachers of TEFL, what we do, we try to ask questions, and these questions help the teacher and also help the learner, right? How these questions help you being teacher? Once you ask questions, my dear students, so in a way you try to judge students that, of course, which part of that concept has been cleared, or which part of the concept is still to be discussed, right? So in this way, this questioning, again, it is not easy to ask questions. So once you ask questions to your students and the students reply, so this asking questions and the reply from the students, right, again, you see, it creates an activity, right? So question and answer session, questioning your students and get the reply. Fine. This way what happens, that both the learner and the teacher, they in fact involve themselves in an activity, and then of course learning takes place, right? And I would say that this process enhances learning. In fact, the learner learns more, right? And this gives satisfaction to the teacher as well, right? Once he asks a question and he gets a reply, it is a message for the teacher that, you see, students are taking interest and they are learning. So that's why the skill we talked about in our last lecture, skills of probing questions. Now, skills of explanation. Yes, again, very important skills of micro teaching, that you need to be able to explain things, right? And of course, you being teacher, you have to have something to explain. And how you explain, if you are ready for it, if you have fluency of language, or in short, if I say, if you have command of language, you can explain things well, right? And how can you have it? Again, when you have whatever you have to teach, you need to know much about that, right? So if you know much about that, if you have read a lot, if you are prepared for that lesson, so what happens? You can easily explain things. Otherwise, things might be difficult for you. Otherwise, you might struggle. You being teacher, right? Therefore, you have to have the skill, being teacher of foreign language, that you need to be able to explain things. Explanation, how you explain, you know it. You can compare things with others, right? I told you rhetorical devices, my dear students, comparison and contrast. You can exemplify things, right? And again, I would say that, well, your fluency of language and your command of language would definitely help you in explaining things. If you are weak in this area, so it would be tough for you to explain things. However, if you have this facility of language, if you have, of course, command of language, or if you are fluent in language, performance and competence, John Lines, right? So if you have performance and competence of language, so you can easily in fact explain things. So the message is for us being a TEFL student that if you are a teacher of this language, you have to teach this language, you need to be good at that language. So how would you do it? Yes, you can practice speaking that language, practice writing that language, practice all the 4 skills. So this is what it would help you in explaining things. Then we talk about stimulus variation, right? That what you say, you need not to be monotone. Monotony, my dear students, kills, right? So what you do when you say, your body language must speak, your voice quality must say, right? So your paralanguage, your vocal, in fact paralanguage means your vocal quality. Again, your kinesics mean your body motion, your postures, fine, your gestures, your facial expressions, right, your eye contact, right? So in this way, these things help improve learning. Our purpose is to help the learner learn that language, right? And you being facilitator, you being trainer, you being teacher of this language, you have to, of course, have this stimulus variation. You need not to be monotone, you need not to be passive in the class. So we talked in the last lecture that you need to be active in the class. So your active participation and your keen interest in the class, and you see that your body shows either you are taking interest in the class or not. So while teaching, you need to be active, not passive. So once you are active, so your student would be active. So you being teacher, what you do, you are a pilot in the class, right? So if the pilot is active, pilot is dynamic, pilot takes interest in the class, so we could say that the class would be active, class would be dynamic, and of course students would take interest in the class and learning would be in the best way. I hope you understand. And then of course the skill we'll talk about, and of course today we'll talk more about this, that is skills of Blackboard writing. Very important area, and most of the cases students of course are weak in this way. Even teachers find it hard to write on the board. So writing on the Blackboard again is a skill, right? So you need to write in a legible handwriting, you need to have a legible handwriting. So when you write, there should be space between letters when you write. People may not have very good hand, but it doesn't mean they cannot teach, right? Those of you who have poor hand, you cannot write well on the board, so you need to focus on legibility, that when you write, it should be legible. So slowly and gradually, my dear students, you would feel that a time would come where you would be writing on board easily, and your writing naturally improves, right? Provided you want to improve. There are some teachers, they have a very bad hand. What they do, that they do not write on the board. I feel this is not the solution, right? If you shirk something, if you avoid something, you cannot do it, in fact. So but if you do it, if you try doing it, so a time comes you learn how to do it, right? So shirking the work is not the solution. The solution is that if you have a problem, you try to overcome that problem, you try to remove that weakness, right? But if you escape that activity, if you feel that I cannot write, I cannot teach writing, so it means that of course now you are preparing yourself that you are not a good teacher of writing. But if you feel the writing is a difficult job to teach, and you start teaching, right, and you take a project as a challenge, and I'm sure once you teach that writing second time, you would be better, a third time even better. So the message is that, you see, if you cannot write well on board initially, do not skip that. Some teachers, they feel it's difficult to write on the board, so they avoid writing on the board, right? I feel this is not an ideal solution to the problem. Solution can be try writing. No problem, it happens in the first time. Maybe there would be laughter in the class, no problem. And that laughter would pinch you to learn how to write on the board. So these are some skills that we talked about. Today we will continue this fourth skill, writing on the blackboard. And today, in fact, the lecture will start fine, would be in fact a summary of all whatever we have talked about on micro-teaching. Let's start now today's lecture. It is part 4 on micro-teaching and lecture number 19. So see, it starts with an image, right? So see, blackboard writing skill. If you see a teacher, right, so she is writing on the board, and if you see what she has done, university in the high school program offers qualified high school juniors and seniors an opportunity to get a head start on college, right? Get what? A head start on college, earn college credit and all that. See the way she is writing. If I ask you that, I mean, the way she writes on the board, is it okay or not? What do you say, by the way? Right? Okay, you say that, I mean, she gave headings in capitals. All right, fine. And whatever she wrote under that heading, is it clear to you? All right. And where is she standing? Right? People who are sitting on her left might not see the board. Right? And then she's also writing on the, I mean, what? On your, yes, left corner. Read more. Fine. So this is one mean that there is a teacher and she is writing on a blackboard and she is using a chalk. Fine. And the way she is standing in front of the board, the way she is writing, right? You can debate on that. That if you feel that she stands well in front of the board and her writing is legible, like you see her headings all in capital, and you see, and she used a different color, right, for the headings, and you come to subheadings, she made some bullets with star, and you see, of course, the one bullet, the second bullet and the third bullet. You might talk of the symmetry, that you see heading 1, heading 2 and heading 3. These headings lack symmetry. Symmetry means there is no proper order. Right? The one heading is on, of course, right side and tilted towards right. Heading, so next point is tilt towards left, and again third point tilts towards right. So this one is, and the way she stands, in fact, and also she writes on the corner, right? On the right corner, she writes, and she writes with hand, left hand and right hand, in fact. Okay, this is one mean that how to write on the board. In the light of the instructions we talked about, you can evaluate it, right? And you can see whether she stands well, right, or she is not using the board. Again, one thing more, if I ask you, let's see, the last point ends on the extreme corner, right? And the right use of the space on the board. Right? Like we discussed, my dear students, when you write on the board, use the space appropriately. And in this way, because she stands and she has covered almost 30% of the blackboard space with her body. Right? In this way, this lady teacher, she has covered 30% of the blackboard space and her writing tilts towards right. And see, where does she start? The first heading, she leaves more space on the left side, and she ends on what? Right side. And she ends at the bottom, if you see that she ends writing on the corner. This is what, my dear students, you have seen, right? So of course, when you see a teacher writing on the board, and when you learn where should a teacher stand, how should he write on the board, or how he uses the board, again, it's very important, right? Because board is a very important teaching aid. It is, of course, the cheapest source for writing in the class. So that's why you need to know how to use this resource and how not to, in fact, misuse it. Because I mean, here if you see that the more space has been used by the teacher with her body, right? And because if you cover the board with your body, so ultimately you waste resource, you waste that space, and ultimately for the next point she has to erase the previous point. The problem is that she is not standing well. Fine. So when you stand in front of the board, either it is whiteboard or the blackboard, my dear students, see that which part of the board you are using, where are you standing, how are you standing, where are you writing, and your font of writing, right? Remember that your writing must be read by the last student sitting in the last row. It's important, right? You need not to focus only on the students who are sitting in the front row. The backbenchers, the people who sit at the back, they are equally important. The whole class is important for you. So that's why when you write, you can ask, of course, right? That, see, you can ask your students when you write if you don't have an idea. Of course, when you enter a class for the first time and you don't know your font size, some people write a very small font size, and that creates a confusion, right? If your writing is very small and that small writing may not be read by the students, and some students, they are shy, they don't even ask you, right? So in that way, definitely, of course, I mean, they take out wrong things, they write wrong things, and that wrong things go on. Is that clear? So what you do, if you want your students to take the right things, you can take a step, they write well on the board. Now this is one mean, this image is there. Again, now another image we see, that the way person, this time again the teacher, of course, where is he standing? Maybe the writing is okay on the board, but she stands in the middle, right? So it means the mid part of the writing has been covered, been concealed by the teacher, and her backside is toward the students, right? And of course she writes on the board, and her back is to the students. And again, some teachers, what they do, that they write and speak simultaneously. So that's why experts say that when you write, you can be quiet for a while, right? So that writing needs your attention. If you write and speak simultaneously, you might mumble, your words might not be clear, right? And of course, when you write on the board, you can be quiet for a while, and later on you can explain things. If you feel that, well, I mean, explanation is a must while writing, then you better bring a chart, right? Display that chart and explain things, right? However, majority feels that you need not to talk when you write. When you are writing, you need to be in fact, what you can be quiet for a while. First finish writing, and then you come to explanation, right? And of course, your standing posture is important. Do not cover the board. Stand aside so that majority would see you. Is that clear? Yes. This is again mean that blackboard writing problems. Now here it looks better, right? Because this time the teacher, of course, writes, and he has not hidden anything. He has not concealed anything, right? What problem you find here, in fact? Maybe you will feel that writing of the teacher is not in a straight line, right? We talked while talking of this blackboard writing that you see right in a straight line, and in this writing you can see that the line is not very straight. There is a bit diagonal line, in fact, right? I was really stuck for ideas, and then teacher moves on. One thing more, you have observed that the teacher starts in the mid, right? He has left more space on his other side. Why he has left this space? maybe he feels that of course this is the space where he stands, and he need not to write there, right? And then of course he writes equation, and if he moves the equation in the mid, m is equal to EC square, right? So thanks of course Chandra for getting. And this is what point is that the teacher writes, fine, and he writes that equation again on the of course what, his right side, right? And the left side is of course blank, fine. If he writes in the mid of the board, that would be more, in fact, I mean, professional, right? So again here mean when he stands, right, and he writes with his right hand, fine, and he in fact his lines are not straight, and then equation goes on the right side. So if you move equation to the mid of the board, majority would see it. So again here is a Blackboard writing, and if you compare it with image 1 and 2, you might say it's a bit better, but still it has some the problems that lines are not straight, fine. Font size, maybe it's okay, but again it depends on the class, and there is no head, right? I mean, there is no heading. There of course there are 5 lines have been written, but of course we don't know which topic is under discussion, right? If he writes theory at the top, so we might know that of course the question is given at the bottom, so you can, I mean, it's the explanation of that. For example, you talk about Newton's first law of motion, right? So you give the theory, or you talk about listening skill. So if you write listening skill at the top, not very top, in the middle, so then you talk about sub skills, it makes sense. Is that clear? So that's why, my dear students, Blackboard writing is an art, is a skill, and this needs lots of practice. The more you practice writing, and if you want to improve this skill, you can. Some teachers don't care for it. They feel that Blackboard is a one resource, and of course the student should be able to read, and wherever they write, they can write on the corner. I have seen so many the teachers, they really mar this Blackboard writing, fine. They write in diagonal way, fine, and of course they make a mess on the board. They unclutter this board, in fact. So this is very important, right? When you write on the board, the writing should not be, they should not be mess on the board, right? Uncluttered, fine. The point that you give, what is the head, what are the subheads, and you see font size is important. If I move on, so here this one, how does it look? I'm sure you have got it. See, so this one is of course and is tall. See, excellent font size, and the teacher has a stick. And is and tall, right? And is tall. Sit down. So this looks better. What do you think? Why? Because see, first of all, the teacher has a good hand, right? She wrote well on the board, right? And she stands at an appropriate place, right? She uses her right hand, fine? And she has not covered anything. She points to the first sentence, and there is a full stop, and is tall, right? And see the font, A is capital, so she has highlighted A, fine. And then there's a full stop, there's a period, fine. Is and tall, again is I capital, and is proper noun, so again A capital, so highlighted. And is tall, right? Again means sign of exclamation, highlighted. And sit down, right? Again mean sit down. T is of course stress, sit down. I hope you understand. So this, writing, of course, if you compare it with the first 3 images, yes, I'm sure you would say this is better. Why it's better? First of all, the teacher stands at a good place. First. Second, the font is reasonably good, right? Reasonable, right? And then teacher has a pointer, right? And third thing is that writing is legible. The fourth thing is that the teacher has left proper spaces. Teacher has not made a mess on the board, right? So of course these are some things, definitely. Of course these things represent. These things give a good image to the students, give a good image to the evaluators. When you do all these things, so naturally you get marks, you of course, and evaluators rank you well. So that's why try to use the board professionally. If you are a professional teacher and if you feel that you cannot, try to. And it is not a difficult job, my dear. So you can do that. Fine. I generally ask my students to, of course, if you are weak in writing, you can have a course on calligraphy. Of course, you need to, if you are a teacher of English, you need to know how to write English well. Right? It's a good thing because, it is said that, when you can analyze personalities through their writing. Personalities are hidden. Is that clear? Behind their writing. So that's why I try to, it happens nowadays, you must have seen that the schools and of course particularly focus on writing skills. They help the students write well, right? This is of course the practice nowadays, and people definitely in fact improve it. In the past this was not the practice, and of course now the teacher, there are some teachers, they may not have good hand, so they can do that. They can improve their writing because writing reflects your personality, right? You need to have a good hand. Clear, students? Any problem? No. Move on. All right. Yes. So that was his skill of Blackboard writing. The sixth skill of micro teaching. So far we talked about 5 important skills, right? And the Blackboard, of course, writing skill is the 5th one that we have just finished talking of, right? Today we are going to start 6th skill of what? Achieving closure. Now what is closure? How to close. Again, is a skill, mind you, that all is well that ends well, and well begin is the half done, right? So opening is important. Similarly, closing is important, right? So how you achieve this skill of achieving closure, it's very important. How you do that, right? So that's why you need to be able to close your teaching successfully, because the way you close, that image retains, that image remains for long, right? And then and you see, when the student goes back, what the first thing that he recalls is your last thing of that teaching. Right? No matter you have talked of that thing at the end, but since that was the last thing, and when student starts recalling, that last thing would come to his mind in the first place, right? So that's why this is an important skill of micro teaching. When a student teacher delivers lecture, yes, why we call student teacher? You know it, because that the student is in fact getting training to be a teacher, right? He teaches and sums up properly and in an attractive way. The skill is termed as closure skills, right? That's why I said that all is well that ends well. So you need to work on this, that how you close your lecture, how you close your teaching, right? So that end, generally some teachers, what they do, that they summarize, right? In our sessions, of course, my dear students, whenever I start a lecture, what I do, I recap. What I do, I pick up the thread. And that's why one slide we have allocated for it, that reviewing the last lecture, right? And at the end, again, we summarize the lecture, right? This is the policy that we have adopted, right? So why? Because once we start a lecture, so I have to pick up the thread, so that to jog your memories, right? To help you the point that we talked about in the last lecture, right? And once you keep those points in mind, and I discussed as well, and I also recall those things, because recalling those things and creating a link with the this lecture, today's lecture, my dear students, what happens? You see, you can easily move on. You can easily grasp things. If I don't do, for example, so what happens? See, then maybe 20 minutes you would be thinking, what is going on? You could not create a link, right, of this lecture with the last lecture. So that's why what we do. And we are directed, and of course it is professional that whenever you start teaching a new lesson, you try to link it with the previous one, right? And of course, when you summarize, so you try to redo whatever you have done in the lecture. And why you summarize? There are many benefits of this summary, and also there are many benefits of this review, right? The benefits could be to help those who have missed, for example, for some reason the previous lecture, right? Because, my dear students, being language teacher, you have to take people with you, right? You have to take everybody on board. So that review of the lecture helps those who have missed the previous session, right? So that summary at least would help them to have know-how of the previous session, and they can go on with this lecture. However, if the teacher doesn't do that, and the people who missed the previous session, they would be in the air. They would not be able to create a link. They might be linked with the previous lecture, right? So therefore, that summary, of course, or the review is important. So here, the skill of micro teaching is that how you close, how you sum up, right? What do you call it? We call it closure skills. The lesson, of course, remains ineffective in the absence of a proper closure. So if you want to have an effective lesson, you need to have effective closing. Is that clear? All right. So students, that is what we call it. This previous skill again, that skills of achieving closure. How can we do that? Feedback in micro teaching. Is that clear? So feedback is the information supplied to the individual. This is what the feedback. Feedback means reply. Is the information supplied to the individual, how the individual has achieved, has done, right? The feedback, of course, being teacher, you get feedback from the students, and of course you see that feedback. Sometimes, of course, you ask for the feedback in writing, and at times the body language of the learners, yes, give you feedback. So it is a two-way process. The teacher can get the feedback, and of course learners, they need feedback, right? For example, we have an assessment procedure. We give students tests. So why we give those tests? Why? Because it's a way to give feedback to the learners, right? The feedback is that how much he has achieved. So feedback is really a key to success for the micro teaching, right? And of course, when you do this micro teaching, of course, you get the feedback from the evaluator, from the supervisor who has seen you teaching, right? So this feedback, in fact, does what? It helps you to improve your weaknesses, right? So that's why the feedback is an essence of micro teaching. Well, students, so we can, this feedback is a very important element of micro teaching. So it can be used in various forms, right? In case of micro teaching, by the supervisor, right? Or videotape, films, TV, which are various sources of feedback. You know, sometimes what happens that maybe there is a camera in the class, right? So that camera, of course, in fact sees, right? So in good institutions, I have seen that there are 5 classes going on. So in every class there is a camera fixed, right? So one, in fact, evaluator, he sits in his office and he can see what is going on in 5 classes. And even if there are 10 classes, so 10 cameras have been fixed, have been installed, and you see the one evaluator, that is a job of a person who sits in his office, and he can have a look on all 10 classes, right? So whenever he sees a problem in a class, he can directly go to that class, in fact, right? So cameras can be used, or your lectures can be recorded, fine, or you can give feedback in writing, right? But in micro teaching, we are talking about micro teaching. So of course, once you teach, in fact, 10 students, 15 students for 10 minutes, right? And you teach one skill, so your supervisor, your evaluator, he evaluates you, right? And he observes your teaching, right? And that's what, of course, and then he gives you feedback, right? And that, in the light of that feedback, of course, you try to improve, right? And if he has evaluated you well, if he has seen every aspect of your teaching, the way you entered the class, the way you started your class, the way you presented your lesson, the way you gave chances for the practice, and of course the way you have your production stage, right? So everything is evaluated, and of course that feedback that you get, you take it an honest, a candid feedback, and you try to improve. Fine. So feedback in micro-teaching is very important part. Now again, why feedback is important, you see with the green, it focuses on sharpening and developing specific teaching skills and eliminating errors, right? Once you get feedback, of course, feedback sharpens your teaching skills, right? Feedback tells you, well, you are not audible in the class, so you try to be audible. Feedback tells you, well, you are monotone in the class, you are monotone, so you try to have variety in your voice. Well, feedback tells you, well, you are not clear. When you speak in the class, you are not clear. You try to be clear, right? Feedback tells you, students, who are not able to understand you, you try to make yourself clear. Feedback tells you, students who are making noise in the class, you try to manage the class well. Feedback tells you, your writing was very small on the board, and you try to improve your writing. Feedback tells you, you were not using board appropriately, you try to improve it. Feedback tells you, in fact, how to stand in front of the board, and you improve all these things. So my dear students, these are the way, right? How do you learn? Through these feedback, right? So these feedback, in fact, sharpens your teaching skills, and again, eliminating your errors, right? You were not clear. Maybe sometime you speak and you never know that of course you are not clear. Listener can tell you, supervisor can tell you that you were not clear, you were very fast. Clear? So then you try to check your shot, you check your words, that I should not be very fast. Or when supervisor, in fact, he gives you feedback that you need to improve your pronunciation, and you work on your pronunciation. Clear? That the supervisor tells you that you are looking down. So then you try to maintain eye contact with your students, right? The feedback tells you that you ignore half of the class. You just look, of course, people who sit in front of the room, right? So in this way, see, you try to overcome. So my dear students, this feedback sharpens your teaching skills, right? Because it's a training. Right? It's a training. So, of course, once you, in fact, under the training, you try to, of course, work on that. I hope you understand. And of course, this feedback eliminates your errors. It enables understanding of behaviors important in classroom teaching. Yes, important. Classroom psychology of the students. Right? So, your behavior in the class is very important, particularly when you are teaching a foreign language. Right? So, that's why it is said that teachers should be psychologists also. Right? His behavior at times, of course, it happens that sometimes the students misbehave. Right? Student, here if you lose your temper, things would not be in your control. Because you are the teacher. Right? You have to teach the guy, of course. You have to teach the students, in fact. Not only that you teach only the language, you also teach them life skills, right? How to live, how to resolve conflicts. Is that clear? So you, of course, you come across many students. Some have some psychological problems, right? Some have some relation problems, the family problems, right? So, here you have to be sensible enough, right, to handle the situation, right? So in this way, yes, this feedback enables. Of course, it happens that some teachers, they insult the students in the class. That micro-teaching, of course. The supervisor, yes, he tells you that, well, my dear teacher, of course, you need not to insult somebody in front of the class. And even, of course, how to correct the students, right? So in this way, this feedback enables you to, of course, to improve your behavior in the class. It increases the confidence of the learner, of course, the teacher. Yes, because once you teach and you get a feedback, of course, the good feedback, obviously, right, tells you that, of course, you have done well and you can improve it. And if the negative feedback comes, you see, well, of course, if you're a good student teacher, then you say, okay, fine, I need to work on it. You will not take things personal. Clear? So feedback is important. It is a vehicle for continuous training for both beginners and for senior teachers. Remember, you should not think that, of course, you have got 10 years of teaching experience and nobody can train you. No, this goes on. Right? This feedback helps you improve, in fact. Right? And, of course, if somebody feels that he has become a perfect teacher, so maybe that is the end of his life. That is saturation. So, of course, striving for the excellence, trying to be the best teacher. This should be your urge, to be the best teacher, to be amongst the best teachers, in fact. So if you keep on working on it, things would be in your favor. I hope you understand. So, strive for the best, right? Always finding faults, and that's why, again, I would say that at the end of every class, just hold yourself accountable. Spare some time for it, no problem. That how was the session? Which were the good points? Which were the bad points? And if you do it, I feel at the end of a semester, you may have a book in front of you. And you can just, really, I tell you, it's very, very important tip that I'm giving you. That at the end of the class, give an activity to the class. And of course, for yourself, keep a copy with you. Keep a notebook with you. And write, or you have a laptop now. Just write a paragraph that how was the experience? Which thing was very good, which thing was boring. So obviously, of course, when you come for the next class, you will try to sharpen that, the good point, and you try to, in fact, control the weak points. So feedback provides experts, supervision, and constructive feedback. Of course, feedback is for the improvement, for the betterment. Feedback is not to, in fact, disturb anybody, not to corner anybody. Feedback is to help improve the teacher of the language, right? So feedback is important that you must keep in mind. So, mind you, to teach is to learn. This is a very important, mind you. It is said, the teacher seeks more than the learner. How is it that, of course? Because once you teach, my dear students, you incorporate your skills, right? You keep on thinking. You think faster than the students, in fact. Because you have to think, you have to keep in mind so many things, and then you teach. Of course, your learning is more. The teacher seeks more than the learner, right? So the teacher is to learn, right? So if you take it in this way, that I'm teaching, why? Because I have to learn. So this teaching and learning process never ends. That's why those who are teachers by choice, they love teaching, so definitely they keep on enjoying it. Every day they come across a new thing, right? And when they read something, they learn a new thing. So to teach is to learn. And of course, when you read something for the class, for example, so and again when you go to the class and you discuss with the students, particularly adults, of course, you come across with different ideas, right? Different ways of thinking. So obviously your, horizon, of course, you broaden your horizon, right? You broaden your vision. And of course the students also, feel comfortable that, well, that there is a topic being discussed. Of course, the teacher has raised a point and the students have given the feedback. And of course, there are 20 sitting in the class, 15 sitting in the class. They have all their minds, of course. So they discuss things, right? So again, to teach is to learn. And micro-teaching, of course, yes, because we are talking in the context of micro-teaching. So students, you know it. The ones you teach 4 or 5 minutes, 4 or 7 minutes, you teach one skill or a sub-skill. So you see that. So to teach is to learn, right? So I will always be student of teaching. Important. Why? Because you want to learn. To teach is to learn. So teaching is a profession that in fact, of course, keeps on, that motivates you for learning. So it is, of course, the best profession where you never stop your learning. To teach is to learn. I hope you understand. Yes. So dear students, again, even the best teacher can learn a great deal from his or her students. Of course, when you enter the class, go with this mind that today you have to learn something. And obviously, my dear students, right, that of course, I mean, knowledge is C. When you come across students from different cultures, right, so from different parts of the world, even from the same country, you find people from different provinces. Maybe you will be teaching students from Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, right? So you'll be teaching students from different, of course, cities, different countries if you are in a multicultural environment. If you are teaching English in a multicultural environment, you find students, for example, you are teaching English in Canada. So what happens? You might find students from Pakistan, from India, from Sri Lanka, right, from Nepal, right? So of course all these people are there. So you are teaching English as a second language, right? So these people from different culture, they come and they learn language, in fact, and you are the teacher. Fine. So even the best teacher can learn a great deal from his students. So students are the great source of learning, great source for the knowledge, right? Because, I mean, the one is very simple, that there are 15 minds are sitting, right? So 15 minds, definitely every mind has a different thing, of course. Some people are good at reading, some are good at observing things. So when you interact with these, yes, you are one, but they are five. See, this of course gesture is there. Teacher is one and they are five. There are four. The class is this one. So that's why even you are the best teacher, still when you go to the class, you come out with something. Clear? Alright. So secret, very important. What is the secret? Yes, is to respect the pupil. Very important, my dear students. If you respect the teacher, of course, definitely, respecting the teacher would respect you. But the secret is that being teacher, you are going to be instructor of this language. You will be teaching English as a foreign language. So the secret for the success is respect the pupil. Don't disrespect the student. When you respect, you remove so many barriers. Students come forward. Right? And once they come forward, they interact. They share their experience. They share their problem with you. And obviously, your language teacher, they would share, you would create environment, and learning would be there. Clear? So respecting the pupil is a must. Right? Do not confuse the students. Fine? I mean, you have to take them, of course, along with you. And if you are a good teacher, if there are more distances between the teacher and the student, so I feel learning cannot be fruitful. Learning would be slow. If the distance is less, right? And then of course, then definitely you can help improve this learning process. Language learning would be the better, right? So therefore, it is said that the teacher should respect the student. This element of respect. And of course, the student must respect the teacher. Of course, it's a value. Right? That of course, it is for the teacher that he should not disrespect. But the student ought to respect the teacher because he is at the receiving end. So this element of respect is a must. Right? So the teacher, if he finds anything wrong, he is there, of course. But sometimes you might have seen that there's insult in public, right? So again, if you insult the students in public, and some teachers do, but they have created an environment for it, right? So if after creating an environment, if you do, maybe people don't mind. But sometimes if there is no environment in the class, and if you do that, that might make the student patient. Some students, in fact, the teacher insult, they leave the class and they bang the door, right? So therefore, this self-respect should not be hurt. right? So this is the, my dear student, that it's a secret that of course being teacher, when you teach language, right? So of course you need to respect the student. Generally of course in our schools it happens that the teachers do not respect, right? In colleges of course there is a respect, even university there is more respect, but the good thing is that if respect is at all levels, because from there students learn. From nursery onwards, if you give respect to your students, your kids, so they would definitely, reply in kind. So need of the hour, important, working together, we can achieve our goal and expected qualities in higher education. Teamwork of course, right? It's important that it's need of the time that we need to work together. Working together is a must. Teamwork should be inculcated, right? Because if you inculcate this teamwork, the group work, the pair work, of course, like in language teaching we do. Yes, what we do? We inculcate this skill. Team building, in fact. That student must learn to work in a team. Teacher can supervise them, in fact. Clear? And in micro-teaching context, sometimes it happens that, well, of course, a student can do micro-teaching in a group, in a pair as well. Or sometime maybe in a group, 5-6 students make a group, they divide the work. Clear? Maybe the one group of course presents in 5 minutes, second group of course gives practice, and the last group of course has production stage. Is that clear? So this is what, my dear students, you see, we can do that. We also teach students for the teamwork, right? Why we say that ultimately they have to work in team. Some students remain shy in their workplace even. Why is it so? Research says that these students have never got any chance to work in a team, right? They have been cornered from the day one. Teachers didn't care. So again, it's the job of a teacher, of course, from nursery to onwards, that, well, if the teacher finds the students stands alone, he doesn't participate, so he should help students participate. Others should be, sometimes it happens that in a group, of course, there are 4 students and the 5th one is odd man out. So 4th should be guided, that take this 5th one with you, right? If there are groups, keep on changing the groups, in fact, right? So when you change the groups, in fact, it helps students mingle, right? So in language teaching, what we do that, we keep on making groups, and of course we keep on changing groups. Do not let one student in one group, right? Again, if one student works in 5 groups, so his obviously interaction would be more, his learning would be more, vis-a-vis if he works in one group, right? So that's why teamwork should be inculcated. Pair work, individual work, pair work, group work, fine, right? Important, of course, it's a need of the time. Here's the teacher. Now what's going on? Right? Teacher, see here. Now, so again, the teacher, of course, is time that it's a time we are in the age of 21st century. So teacher, in fact, needs to work more. Teacher, in fact, needs to be aware of the present technology. Teacher needs to develop his skills, because now it's an age of IT, age of information technology, right? You will lag behind if you do not go with the time. So if you are a language teacher, you need to know which other activities can be used, what is going on, which websites are there, right? So you need to research, you need to focus if you want to teach, because nowadays it's a time that maybe you go to the class and you find your students a step ahead of you in technology. Clear? So that's why, of course, my dear students, you need to anticipate these things and prepare yourself well. So it's a time to give summary of this lecture that we have today. That micro teaching, of course, we spent 4 lectures on it, involves presentation of micro lesson, right? So micro means small lesson. Again, micro students would be 7 to 10. Again, the time would be 5 to 7 minutes. So it's a micro-teaching. Again, micro-teaching is, of course, when the student teacher, is that clear? The student wants to be a teacher. So he is given 5 to 7 minutes so that he would teach, right, a small number of group, and in this way when he does these things, he learns how to teach a small number of people, how to teach one skill, and how to manage the class, right? So this is what micro teaching, student teacher, right? Again, a very important activity for training, that if you want to be a teacher, so micro teaching is in mock teaching, we call it. You learn different things. Feedback given by the peers, role playing as students. Again, feedback is important. Success, of course, is feedback. When you give the feedback, you get the feedback, and you properly utilize that feedback. I mean, supervisor gives you feedback. Supervisor, talks about your good points, and he also highlights your weak points. So what you do, you learn from these points, right? This feedback sharpens your skills. Feedback helps you improve, right? So this way, of course, means that a supervisor is there, he supervises your teaching, and he gives you feedback. Participants learn about strengths and weaknesses in themselves as teachers. Yes, because you are going to be future teacher if you are going to start. If you are a professional teacher, and if you are doing it, yes, again, once you start teaching in the light of these micro teaching, so then you check yourself. With every step, you will check that either you are writing well on the board or not. Either you are standing well in front of the board or not. Either you have started lecture well or not. Either you have concluded well or not. So how you start, how you conclude, how you move on. Clear? How you talk. Fine? So how you manage the class, the classroom management. How you play different games in the class, psychology of the students. So all these things are kept in mind. You plan strategies for improvement in performance. Yes, definitely. When you teach, you learn the weaknesses. You come to know about the weaknesses, and then you make strategies how to overcome this problem, in fact. Fine. And then you teach is to learn. Of course, very important point. That why you teach? Because you want to learn. So it means the teacher remains a learner. Right? So of course the teacher is a lifetime learner. Right? And his learning never stops, because he teaches and he learns. And of course in every class he comes across different students. Right? So of course one teacher learns. Even the best teacher, whenever he goes to a class, he comes out. Right? So he comes out with the new experience. Every semester, of course, every batch you come across new students. Right? So what happens? New students come. You talk with them. Right? And you get feedback. And of course, you learn a lot. You learn about their cultures, you learn about their language, you learn about their dresses, you learn about their accents, you learn about their dialects. So everything, of course, it goes on. Right? That's why, of course, the teacher never dies. Fine? Secret to education is to respect the pupil. What do? You respect. Right? You give respect and you get respect. Is that clear? Fine? So respect is two-way. If the teacher insults the students in the class, most probably, of course, the reply could not be favored. That's why, of course, when we language teachers, we say that, well, respect is an important element. Right? So, give respect. And in our case, of course, like we teaching English as a foreign language in our country, of course, only adults come. Right? So, therefore, in that context, my dear students, you need to give respect to the students. So, respect paves grounds for learning. Disrespect bars, stops learning, in fact. So, respecting the student is a must. Right? Give due respect to your students. So, students, this is what, of course, the micro teaching is there. It's a very important area. These are the references. Dr. J.L. Gulhan, an EPG Department of Education. So he in fact helped us in this slides. So on micro-teaching, so to have any question, you can ask that. We have spent four hours, in fact, 4 lectures on micro-teaching, and you can well imagine importance of this segment of this course, right? And still I would not say that we have done much. A lot has to be done, but of course we had time constraint. So this one that we could do, and we try to finish it. Still, if any question, you can ask. Yes, if any question? Why we have micro teaching? All right, simple, students. That, I mean, here in this phase, what happens, that the student teacher means that he wants to be a teacher, and he in fact starts teaching. So I mean, it's a mock teaching. Students are given some time, and what he does, that in that time he presents, and what he does, that he gives practice to students, and then of course what happens, that he of course holds a production session. So presentation, practice and production. So all these 3 stages are evaluated, and he is given feedback. In the light of that feedback, that student teacher improves. Any other question? No? All right. So it's a time. Say goodbye. See you in the next class.